Have you ever wondered what the real story of Hansel and Gretel is like? Well, buckle up, because it's darker, weirder, and way more twisted than that sugary version you might remember. Welcome to YourScripts, where we uncover the darker, crazier side of your favorite fairy tales. Once upon a time, in a small cottage near a vast and dark forest, there lived a poor woodcutter and his wife. They had 2 children, a boy named Hansel and a girl named Gretel. Life was tough for the family. They had so little food that many days they didn't have enough to eat. One cold night, the woodcutter lay awake in his bed, tossing and turning, troubled by the thought of how he could feed his family. Finally, he sighed deeply and turned to his wife.
"What will become of us?"
he asked, his voice heavy with worry.
We don't even have enough to feed our children, let alone ourselves.
Now you'd think maybe the wife would say, "Let's plant a garden, it's okay, we'll make it through." But instead she said,
"I'll tell you what, husband. Tomorrow morning we'll take the children deep into the forest, where it's thick and dark. We'll make a little fire for them and give them each a piece of bread. Then we'll leave them there, and they'll never find their way home. We'll be free of them, and the problem will be solved."
The woodcutter's heart sank.
"No, wife.
He replied,
I can't do that. I can't take my children into the forest and leave them there alone. What if wild animals come and hurt them?"
She sneered at him.
"You fool,"
she said sharply.
"If we don't do this, we'll all starve. If you're too soft-hearted, maybe you should start preparing the coffins, because that's what will happen to us."
She wouldn't let up, her voice harsh and determined, until finally the woodcutter gave in.
"But I do feel sorry for our poor children,"
he murmured quietly. The 2 children lay awake, their stomachs empty and growling, unable to sleep from hunger. They had heard everything their stepmother had said to their father, and now they knew their fate. Gretel began to cry softly.
"It's all over for us,"
she whispered.
"Hush now, Gretel."
Hansel said gently, his voice steady.
"Don't worry. I'll figure something out."
That night, when the house grew quiet and their parents were asleep, Hansel slipped out of bed. He put on his little coat and quietly crept to the back door. The moon was shining brightly, and the stones outside the house glimmered like silver in the night. Hansel bent down and filled his coat pocket with as many small white pebbles as he could. Then he crept back to his sister's side.
"Don't worry, Gretel,"
he said softly.
"Go to sleep now. God will take care of us."
And with that, he lay back down in his bed. When the first light of morning broke through the window, the stepmother came into the children's room and woke them roughly.
"Get up, lazy bones,"
she scolded.
"We're going into the forest to gather wood."
She handed each of them a small piece of bread.
"This is your breakfast,"
she said.
"But don't eat it yet. Save it for later, or you'll have nothing for lunch."
Gretel tucked the bread into her apron, while Hansel secretly filled his pockets with the pebbles. Then, together, they set off toward the forest. As they walked, Hansel kept glancing back over his shoulder at the house. He did it once, then twice, then again and again. His father noticed and called out,
"Hansel, what are you looking at? Don't forget your legs, boy, and keep walking."
"Father,"
said Hansel, looking back at the house again.
"I'm just watching my little white kitten sitting on the roof, waving me goodbye."
"You foolish boy,"
the stepmother snapped.
"That's not your kitten. It's just the sunlight shining on the chimney."
Of course, Hansel wasn't looking at any kitten at all. Instead, he was secretly dropping small white pebbles from his pocket, leaving a trail behind them. After a while, they reached the heart of the forest, where Hansel's father told the children to gather wood to make a fire. Hansel and Gretel worked together, collecting enough sticks and twigs to build a little pile, like a small mountain. They set the fire, and soon the flames were crackling high.
"Now lie down by the fire and rest,"
said their stepmother, her voice sharp.
"We're going to cut more wood. When we're done, we'll come back to get you."
Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, their stomachs empty except for the bread they'd been given. At noon, they each ate their small piece. The children thought they could still hear their father chopping wood in the distance, but really, It was only the wind moving a dry branch on an old withered tree. The hours dragged on, and the children grew tired. The warmth of the fire made their eyes heavy, and soon, both Hansel and Gretel were fast asleep. When Hansel and Gretel finally woke up, it was dark. The fire had gone out, and the cold night air made Gretel shiver.
How will we ever find our way out of this forest?
She cried, her voice full of fear. But Hansel, always calm, put his arm around her and said, "Don't worry, Gretel. Wait just a little while longer. When the moon rises, we'll be able to see the way home." Sure enough, when the full moon climbed into the sky, its light shone brightly, making the little pebbles Hansel had dropped sparkle like silver. Taking Gretel by the hand, Hansel led her along the path, following the trail of stones that glimmered in the moonlight. They walked all through the night, and by the time the sun began to rise, they had found their way back to their father's house. They knocked on the door, and when their stepmother opened it, she scolded them harshly.
You naughty children, where have you been? Why did you sleep so long in the woods? We thought we'd never see you again.
But their father's face brightened when he saw them. His heart had ached when he'd left them in the forest, and he was relieved to have them back. However, not long after that, another great famine came to the land. One evening, the children overheard their stepmother speaking to their father as they lay in bed.
We're almost out of food,
She said.
We have only half a loaf left. After that, there's nothing. The children must be sent away again. This time, we'll take them deeper into the forest, where they'll never find their way home. There's no other way to manage.
The woodcutter's heart broke at the thought, and he sighed deeply.
It would be better to share our last bit of bread with the children than to send them away.
But the stepmother would not listen. She shouted at him, scolding him until he gave in. And so, just as before, the man was forced to agree, even though it pained him deeply. But Hansel and Gretel weren't asleep. They had heard everything their parents had said. When their parents finally went to bed, Hansel quietly got up, planning to go out and gather more pebbles, just like before. But to his surprise, the door was locked. No pebbles tonight.
Don't worry, Gretel.
He whispered, comforting his little sister.
God will help us. Just go to sleep and we'll be all right.
The next morning, the stepmother came into their room and roughly pulled the children out of bed. She gave them each a small piece of bread, much smaller than the last time. On the way to the forest, Hansel secretly crumbled his bread into small pieces, letting the crumbs fall into the path behind them.
What are you doing, Hansel?
Asked his father, noticing him lagging behind.
I'm just looking at my little pigeon sitting on the roof, saying goodbye to me.
Hansel replied, trying to keep up the lie.
You silly boy,
His stepmother snapped.
That's not a pigeon. It's just the morning sun shining on the chimney pots.
But Hansel didn't stop. He kept dropping crumbs as they walked, making a trail behind them. This time, their stepmother led them even farther into the forest, to a part they had never seen before. When they reached a spot deep in the woods, the stepmother made a big fire and told them,
Sit here and rest, children. When you're tired, you can sleep. We're going to cut more wood in the forest, and when we're ready to go home, we'll come back to get you.
By noon, Gretel shared the little bread she had left with Hansel, who had scattered his crumbs along the road earlier. After they ate, they lay down by the fire and fell asleep. But when they woke up, it was already dark and no one had come to fetch them.
Don't worry, Gretel.
Hansel said, trying to comfort her.
Wait until the moon rises, and we'll be able to follow the breadcrumbs back home.
But when the moon finally rose, the children were in for a terrible surprise. The breadcrumbs were gone. The birds of the forest and fields had gobbled them all up. Hansel thought they might still be able to find the way, but as they searched, they realized they were lost. They walked all through the night and into the next day, searching for any sign of home. But they couldn't find their way out of the thick forest. They were very hungry now, with nothing to eat but a few berries they picked from bushes along the way. Their feet grew sore, and when they were too tired to walk any longer, they finally lay down under a tree and fell asleep, hoping that the next day would bring them help. The next morning came, but still they could not find their way back. 3 whole days had passed since they had left their father's house, and instead of finding their way out of the woods they were deeper in, if help didn't come soon, they would starve. Around noon, Hansel and Gretel saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a branch, singing so sweetly that they stopped to listen. When the bird finished, it spread its wings and flew ahead of them, leading the way. They followed it until they came upon a strange little house, and when they looked closer, they saw that it was made of bread, with a roof covered in cakes and windows made of transparent sugar.
"We'll have some of this,"
said Hansel.
"I'll eat a bit of the roof, and you can have some of the window. It'll be sweet."
Hansel reached up and broke off a piece of the roof to taste, while Gretel stood by the window and began nibbling at it. Suddenly, they heard a soft voice from inside the house, calling out,
"Nibble, nibble, like a mouse. Who's nibbling at my house?"
The children quickly answered,
"Never mind. It's just the wind."
and continued eating without a care. Hansel, enjoying the taste of the roof, took a larger piece, while Gretel pulled out a big round window pane and sat down to eat it. Soon the door of the house opened and an old woman appeared, leaning on a crutch. Hansel and Gretel were frightened and dropped the bits of food they had been eating. But the old woman just smiled and said,
"Ah, my dear children, how did you get here? Come inside and stay with me. You won't be any trouble."
She gently took them by the hand and led them into her home, where a delicious meal was waiting: milk, pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. After eating, she showed them 2 little white beds, and they fell asleep in them, feeling as though they were in heaven. What they didn't know, however, was that the old woman, despite her kindness, was a wicked witch. She had built the candy house to lure children in so she could trap them. Once inside, she would kill them, cook them, and eat them, making a feast of it. The witch's eyes were red and weak, so she couldn't see very well, but her sense of smell was sharp, and she always knew when children were near. When she realized Hansel and Gretel were close, she cackled with glee, saying to herself,
"I've got them now, and they won't escape."
Early the next morning, before the children woke up, she crept into the room and looked at them as they slept, their cheeks rosy and peaceful.
"What a fine feast I'll have,"
she thought. She grabbed Hansel and dragged him to a little stable, locking him behind a grating. No matter how much he called out or screamed, it was no use. Then she went back to Gretel, shook her awake, and ordered,
"Get up, lazy bones. Go fetch water and cook something nice for your brother. He's locked up outside in the stable, and I'm going to fatten him up. When he's fat enough, I'll eat him."
Gretel burst into tears, but she had no choice. She had to do what the witch told her. While Hansel was fed the best food, Gretel was given nothing but crab shells to eat. Every morning, the old woman would go to the stable and call,
"Hansel, stretch out your finger so I can see if you're getting fat enough."
Hansel, clever as ever, would hold out a little bone instead of his finger. The witch, whose sight was so poor, thought it was Hansel's finger and wondered why he wasn't getting any fatter. When 4 weeks had passed and Hansel still seemed as thin as ever, the witch could wait no longer.
"That's it, Gretel.
She cried.
Whether Hansel is fat or lean, tomorrow I will kill and cook him."
Poor Gretel wept bitterly.
Oh dear God, help us. If we had been eaten by wild beasts in the forest, at least we would have died together.
But the old woman only scolded,
"Stop crying. It does no good."
The next morning, she forced Gretel to get up early, light the fire, and fill the kettle.
"First we'll bake,"
said the witch.
"I've already heated the oven and kneaded the dough."
She pushed Gretel towards the oven, its flames burning brightly.
"Crawl inside, child, and see if it's hot enough for the bread,"
she said. But Gretel, thinking quickly, said,
I don't know how to fit in. How can I get inside?
The witch bent down and said,
"Foolish girl, the opening is big enough. Look, I can fit myself."
As the witch leaned forward, Gretel gave her a hard shove, sending the witch into the oven. Then she slammed the door shut and locked it. The witch howled in fury, but Gretel ran away as fast as she could. Gretel ran straight to Hansel, opened the stable door, and cried,
Hansel, we're free, the old witch is dead.
Hansel flew out of the stable like a bird from its cage. They embraced, laughing and crying together, overjoyed. Then they went through the witch's house and found chests full of pearls and precious stones.
This is better than Flintstones,
said Hansel as he filled his pockets. Gretel also filled her apron with treasures.
Let's go home,
said Hansel, and after traveling for hours, they came to a wide river.
How will we get across?
Said Hansel, seeing no bridge or stepping stones. But then Gretel spotted a white duck swimming nearby.
Maybe the duck can help us,
she said. She called out to it,
Duck, duck, here we stand, Hansel and Gretel on the land. Stepping stones and bridge we lack. Carry us over on your nice white back.
The duck swam over and Hansel climbed on its back first.
No,
said Gretel.
It will be too hard for the duck to carry us both at once. I'll go after Hansel.
The duck carried them safely, one at a time, like a fluffy Uber until they reached the other side. They continued on, and the path grew more familiar. At last, they saw their father's house in the distance. They ran to it, and when their father opened the door, he was overjoyed to see them. The wicked stepmother was dead. When Gretel opened her apron, pearls and jewels spilled onto the floor, and Hansel took handfuls of precious stones from his pockets. The family was rich now, and they never had to worry again. They lived happily ever after. And that is the end of my tale. And if anyone happens to catch the mouse that runs by, they may make themselves a nice fur cap. And that, my friends, is the real twisted tale of Hansel and Gretel, a story of clever kids, terrible grown-ups, and a house you can eat. Did you enjoy? Then please like, subscribe, and come back for more dark fairy tales here on YourScripts.